All right, so good morning, everybody, and thanks, Nick, for that introduction, and thanks to my colleagues on the panel as well. Before I go into what Nick asked us to talk about, and if Nick, you'll forgive me for just a minute, I do want to take a moment this morning to share my own personal reflection of what I've seen here at the US Ignite Summit over the last couple of days. I think it's been really extraordinary to see all the fabulous gigabit-capable applications that have been developed over the course of the last year and that have been demonstrated and talked about here in Chicago. And I think the progress that US Ignite has made in just 1 year's time and the promise that it offers in the long term in terms of being able to impact the public good in all sectors of society, from energy to transportation to healthcare and to public safety and beyond, is really, truly remarkable. And so I think perhaps most importantly this morning, we should acknowledge all of you in the room who are with us today for all of your efforts, for your dedication, for your energy, for your commitment, for your excitement to the US Ignite initiative. So why don't you give yourselves a round of applause for everybody. So really, your work has been very inspiring. So now to the subject matter at hand this morning and the National Science Foundation. So for those of you who were here yesterday morning, my boss, Farnham Jahanian, mentioned that the National Science Foundation has a long history of supporting foundational research in all areas of computing, communications, and information technologies. And in this way, NSF is somewhat unique relative to some of the other agencies that are represented on this panel or represented here at the summit. We don't have a very specific sector-driven mission such as energy or transportation or healthcare for that matter. But we do seek to work with our partners at the other agencies and work with our partners all across the nation to try and advance the frontiers of science, education, and infrastructure quite broadly. And so in this spirit, it's in this spirit that our goal with US Ignite from the very beginning has been to leverage our long-standing commitments to mid-scale infrastructure through the Genie project that you just heard Chip Elliott talk about this morning, and beyond in areas such as software-defined networking and wireless and data analytics, to really enable a next-generation gigabit-capable network at a national scale. And so last summer, in support of these goals, the National Science Foundation issued a Dear Colleague letter that many of you may have seen, a DCL, and it called for relatively small proposals that could demonstrate and actually develop applications, public sector gigabit applications in areas of national priority. And we identified in that Dear Colleague letter 6 areas of national priority: clean energy, transportation, advanced manufacturing, cyber learning, healthcare, and public safety and emergency preparedness. And at the time that we issued that Dear Colleague letter, our expectation, our hope, was that we would be able to see success in terms of demonstrations of these apps a year later. And sure enough, yesterday, I think we couldn't be more pleased with the results that we saw yesterday and that we've seen all week long here in Chicago. And I want to note that several of the demos and talks that you heard about yesterday were funded under the Dear Colleague letter mechanism that we issued last year, including the work of Mike Zink and his colleagues at the University of Massachusetts dealing with weather radars and syncing them up with ultra-high-speed network connectivity. Marge Skubik, I know Marge is still here in the back this morning, and her colleagues at the University of Missouri who've explored means for being able to detect health changes early on through in-home sensor-based monitoring. And Lev Gonik and Marv Schwartz at Case Western, when the demo lords are favorable upon us, all of their work in terms of developing high-definition, multi-point video conferencing and the ability to realize the potential of that in areas like healthcare and education and so on. And so all of those and others throughout the course of the day yesterday were examples of projects that we funded under the Dear Colleague letter mechanism that we issued last year. So where are we going forward from that in the year ahead? So you'll have to forgive us a little bit. We just received our budget numbers on Friday for this fiscal year. Those of us in the federal government know what that means, and those of you who are budget managers can appreciate. So we have our budget numbers for the entire fiscal year on Friday, and the fiscal year ends on September 30th. So we still have a little bit of homework to do in terms of exactly what we're going to do this year. But I am pleased to say, based off of the success over the last year, that we expect to support additional requests for app development projects along the lines of what you saw yesterday in the months ahead. Last year, we used, according to the Dear Colleague letter, what's called an EAGER funding mechanism. EAGER stands for Early Concept Grants for Exploratory Research. They are fairly small, up to $300,000 for up to 2 years. They're meant to support early and potentially transformative research ideas and approaches. And so while we don't have the precise details yet, I can tell you that you should stay tuned. I encourage you to stay tuned. And I can also tell you that you should be thinking along the same lines as what's in the Dear Colleague letter from last year, which is public on our website. And that is, to be specific, if you're thinking about an application idea, you're thinking about putting in for an EAGER or something along those lines, you should think about 4 things. Number 1, how does your app idea relate to a particular area of national priority? And I listed a few at the beginning of my remarks. Number 2, what's the scientific and engineering motivation that really drives that particular proposed app idea and effort? Number 3, what's the novelty and what are the benefits that might accrue if that application or service were to be widely deployed? And number 4, think about the members of your team in terms of who they are, how they come together, how they fit together from different sectors, from entrepreneurs to innovators to researchers to students and so on. And how can you showcase results at some level of scale involving institutions, campuses, and/or cities? Now, as was the case last year, our expectation would be that projects would be able to demonstrate success in the form of preliminary application demos about a year or so after we fund them or less. And so be thinking along those lines as well. I do want to emphasize with this particular Dear Colleague letter that we issued last year, our goal was and will continue to be to really see how the app idea that you might have will impact a national priority area directly. So if you're thinking about education, for instance, think more specifically than just a broad brush stroke of being able to impact the education arena. How will that app idea really transform, for example, the classroom setting? Or how will it change the way students actively interact with one another and learn new concepts and learn new ideas? So that's the Dear Colleague letter mechanism from last year. Again, stay tuned. And that's specific to the US Ignite initiative. Now, more broadly, as I mentioned, the National Science Foundation is interested in furthering the foundations of computing and communications technologies. And so we issue calls for proposals, solicitations as we call them, for researchers and practitioners to develop new ideas, to implement them, and to transition them to practice. And our investments span core areas such as cybersecurity research, networking, virtualization, middleware, and so on. And they also span cross-cutting areas that touch on national priorities, such as the Big Data Initiative that I'm sure many of you have heard about, which supports foundational research to advance big data techniques and technologies in all sectors, as well as the Smart and Connected Health Initiative, which aims to accelerate the development and the use of innovative approaches that support the transformation of healthcare that we're seeing in terms of preventive, proactive, evidence-based, personalized, person-centered care, as well as a focus on well-being rather than a focus on disease. And so we have similar programs that are cross-cutting in the areas of energy and sustainability and advanced manufacturing. So I encourage you, if nothing else, as you leave this session this morning, to do one of 4 things. Number 1, reach out to Susie Iacona, who's in the back of the room, or to myself, or to our US Ignite Program Director, Brian Lyles, who isn't here in Chicago with us, but I can point you in his direction. If you have an app idea and you'd like to discuss it with us, please feel free to do that. Number 2, I encourage you to continue to stay tuned for additional details. We'll try to get them out as soon as we have some sense of it. And number 3, I encourage you to check out the NSF website constantly. We're continuously issuing new solicitations for the upcoming fiscal year, and so I encourage you to look at those for opportunities that might be interest to many of you in the room. And I know those from the research community, the academics in the room, have quite a bit of experience with that. And then number 4, I encourage you to talk with your colleagues in the room who have been funded in the past year through our Dear Colleague letter, for example, to get a sense of what that process entailed and to get a sense for how they went about it, and try to find some synergies and some common grounds and some new collaborations, because that's really what we hope to do, is to try and bring together the right parts to make a better whole. So on behalf of my colleagues at the National Science Foundation, again, thank you to the US Ignite Partnership for all of your efforts. Thank you to Mozilla Ignite. And again, thank you to all of you for making US Ignite a success up until this point.
Thank you very much. It is, in fact, a pleasure to be here today. I'm from our Chicago Regional Office. For those who were in the audience yesterday, you may have had the opportunity to hear from our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Matt Erskine, who came in from Washington, D.C. to give you the Economic Development Administration's national perspective and national focus. Today, I'd like to bring it down a level and talk a little bit about a regional focus, a little closer to where the rubber meets the road. For those who may have had no understanding or interaction with the Economic Development Administration, I want to give you a very, very brief introduction to EDA and what we do. Oop. Okay. EDA is a small grant-making agency within the Department of Commerce. There's EDA's mission. I'll let you read that for yourselves. We are part of a larger Department of Commerce. We have about 200 employees in 6 regional offices, plus the Washington, D.C. office. So if you do the math, we're a very, very small office here in Chicago. We're a relatively small office within Department of Commerce and within the federal government. Yet we like to think we play a very important role in that, as our mission statement tells you. EDA's sole focus is Economic Development Administration, and that's not to take away anything from our other federal partners who also are engaged and support economic development, but in the context of a much larger, much broader mission. For EDA, economic development is our mission. I want to talk about 2 specific grant funding opportunities that EDA has engaged in with our other federal partners since 2010. We have about a dozen grant programs. Our largest is our Public Works program. That's kind of our signature or bread and butter for those who do have some knowledge of EDA. But lately, we've recognized the benefit of federal collaboration. That is, leveraging scarce federal resources with our other federal partners in order to achieve a greater good, specifically with respect to economic development. 2 funding opportunities that have been in place since 2010. The first is called the I-6 Challenge. I for innovation, 6 because initially it had 6 federal partners at the table with shared resources. The other is our Jobs and Innovation Accelerator Challenge. Launched in 2010, the I-6 Challenge is a cutting-edge federal grant program that supports truly innovative initiatives through a multi-agency competition led by the U.S. Department of Commerce. The purpose is to encourage and reward universities and research centers to create proof-of-concept centers that identify innovations to commercialization technology and create high-growth, successful companies through business model support, access to investors, mentors, and even potential customers. Over the last 2 years, the I-6 Challenge has provided $24 million to 12 winners across the U.S. to create their own centers for innovation and entrepreneurship. In addition, these centers have raised nearly $2 million from the private sector to support their efforts, in line with EDA's emphasis on private support for its initiatives. The I-6 would not be possible without critical support and partnership from the National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Environmental Protection Agency. In addition, technical support has been provided by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST as they're known, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, as well as the Small Business Administration. And similar to the I-6 Challenge, the Jobs and Innovation Accelerator Challenge was launched in 2011 as a multi-agency funding opportunity to support advanced manufacturing activities and drive high-potential industry clusters. Awardees implemented coordinated, flexible, and customized strategies to remove obstacles and promote advanced manufacturing growth in targeted industries. The Advanced Manufacturing Jobs Accelerator was designed to foster intensive collaboration and forge partnerships among diverse stakeholders, including industry, labor, academia, and government at the national, state, and regional levels. Funding agencies included the EDA, again, NIST, the Department of Energy, the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration, and SBA. And $20 million in combined federal funding was awarded to 10 public-private partnerships in 2012. So that gives you just a flavor of some of the strategic initiatives that EDA has been involved in the last several years. We expect and hope that that will continue in FY14 and the out years as well. Of course, our funding is always, as Irwin alluded to, is dependent upon Congress and the budgets. So let's talk very, very briefly about who is an eligible applicant for an EDA grant. First of all, to be an eligible applicant, you would have to be one of those entities listed on the screen, a state or local unit of government, an institution of higher education or a consortium of institutions of higher education, or a nonprofit working in cooperation with a unit of local government. A few things that EDA cannot do, and perhaps this is the clearest takeaway of all, is unfortunately EDA does not provide direct assistance to for-profit organizations or private individuals. I encourage you to visit EDA's website for more information, including information about the I-6 and the Jobs and Innovation Accelerator Challenge. That's my contact information, and I will be around after today's panel at the breakout sessions if anyone has any questions for me, if you'd like to just simply walk away with a business card or learn a little bit more about EDA. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about some exciting extensions of SDN that we're working on to help enable you, the end users. We're going to provide these extensions through fielding a prototype operational network that has additional capabilities. And I work for the National Coordination Office, which is on the white block on the left-hand side here, which reports to OSTP. And we help support the Networking and Information Technology Research and Development NITRD subcommittee. And that subcommittee oversees all of the information technology research and development programs across all of the federal agencies. And in the middle block, if you go down most of the way, one of the groups that is under that subcommittee is the Large-Scale Networking Coordinating Group, and I oversee and coordinate that group. We received a tasking from OSTP to the Large-Scale Networking Coordinating Group to essentially, the objective is to field a prototype operational SDN network that has new capabilities that include interdomain functionality at a national and international scale. It will be a scalable capability, provide 100 gig dynamic optical networking across layers 1, 2, and 3, and will provide secure and resilient functioning. These are extraordinarily large expansions of the current capabilities. There are difficulties in interdomain communications and functioning among the Genie domains. We're going to try to overcome those interdomain roadblocks to provide seamless functioning. We hope to field a prototype network that will go from coast to coast, but will also have international links to both Japan and to Europe and Amsterdam. We think this is just an extraordinarily important development, and now is the right time to do it. So the approach for accomplishing this is to hold a workshop that includes academia, the federal agencies, industry, and I would also add to that the groups that oversee the development of coordinated capabilities. So we're going to identify the short-term needs for deploying and operating the prototype operational network. That's one of our objectives. So basically get the operational network off the ground. Identify the longer-term needs to increase SDN capabilities. That is, how do we, once we have the initial operational capability, how do we make it more secure, more robust, more scalable, providing more of the functionality that the end users need, and finally provide a strategic plan for the federal agencies to provide a roadmap on how we get there to fielding this capability and developing the additional capabilities for SDN over the longer term. So some of the issues that we know we really have to overcome, for me, probably the most difficult one that I see are the interdomain policy issues. How do you provide for the management and control of the resources? How do you share information? Generally, the information on network availability and performance is considered to be pretty protected information. So how do you get people to actually share that information? And finally, how do you carry out identity management? We need to provide the interdomain transparency and interoperation on a national and international scale. It's not easy. That's kind of the technology challenge. Provide the technology for layer 1, 2, and 3 interoperations. Security is always a critical issue. For me, that's the second most important issue that we need to address after the interdomain policy issues. Provide the resiliency, quality of service, architecture, and efficiency of operations, and finally, applications development and demonstration. And certainly US Ignite has already developed many applications that are appropriate for SDN. We look forward to the participation of US Ignite in this expanded capability. We think that's critical. So this workshop, our current concept is that it will be held in December of 2013, probably right around the middle of December, getting together 100 key people from academia, industry providers and users. So we expect providers like Verizon, MCI to attend, the current companies that field SDN in a big way, like Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, the equipment providers like Cisco and Juniper. We also expect the user communities like US Ignite and the Genie communities to participate. The network's actually deploying SDN, and we have in the organizing committee strong participation by Internet2 and ESNet, which are currently deploying the SDN in a significant way. The SDN security community is critical, and we have a couple of the major research organizations at universities that are currently working on that topic who will on the organizing committee as well. And finally, the standards organizations like ONF, GLIF, OGF. So we will be holding this in Washington, D.C. Seems likely that we'll be holding it at the NSF facilities itself. This expedites the participation by critical federal agencies, including DARPA and DoD. So that's the concept. And look forward to working with you to make this a reality and to using those facilities.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. First, let me say thanks to US Ignite, Bill, Joe, Jessica, and everyone else for hosting me here, hosting all of us. Secondly, I work in the Office of Innovation and Improvement at the Department of Ed, And I'm going to ask that you not judge how innovative the Department of Ed is based on how rudimentary my slides are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about innovation in the context of the education world, and including how technology plays a vital role in that. And I'll talk about a few different things, but I think the main point that I hope you leave here with is that the work of all of you and the work of organizations like US Ignite is incredibly important to our collective educational future. And there's a lot of reasons this is the case, but it kind of all stems from one sort of harsh truth, which is that if we are going to reach the president's goal of, again, leading the world in college graduates by 2020, if we're going to increase student achievement, close achievement gaps, close opportunity gaps, and most important, sort of prepare the next generation of American kids to be competitive in a 21st century global economy, we need to innovate in the education space. And up here, I've written, we need to get better faster, but there's actually a more specific kind of context for what innovation means in the world of education. And so the way we think about it is, if you think of a sort of a 2x2 box, with the amount of increased performance on one scale and the sort of adoption rate on the other axis, we want to be in the upper right quadrant, which is something that leads to dramatic improvements in performance and reaches scale. If something is really great but doesn't reach scale, it's just sort of an invention and it's great. If something scales and goes across the country but it actually doesn't improve things very much, it's really just sort of a trend or a fad. And we want to sort of avoid those things. What we need to remain focused on is creating innovations. And in that context, technology is actually a crucial component of this. I was with Secretary Duncan a couple weeks ago at the Cable Show event hosted by the cable industry, and he called technology a game changer because of all the exciting opportunities it presents in education, and that's both in terms of increasing access and equity, increasing opportunities to really exciting learning experiences for kids regardless of geography, regardless of income. And I think some of the examples that were developed and showcased yesterday sort of demonstrate the power of that. And then the second thing I'll say is that it seems to be the case that we're only at the very beginning of how technology is going to change how we think of education in terms of how it's structured and how it's delivered. What we don't want to do is have a world where we're just taking everything we've done up to this point in the classroom and just moving it to a digital screen, right? So instead of print textbooks, we have digital textbooks. Instead of boring lectures, we have videos of boring lectures. We want to avoid that world, right? And I think like we're starting to see some really innovative things emerge, and we're seeing pockets of exciting activities going on around the country. But I think one of the roles that you all play in these next generation applications that are being developed is really demonstrating to the world and demonstrating to teachers and parents and families and kids how technology can be used to totally reimagine how the education experience looks for that child. So if you look at some of the apps that were highlighted yesterday, like Sizzle or OpenPath or even Engage 3D, you can even see like on a day-to-day basis in the classroom how using some of these gigabit applications can totally change the experience for kids. And so because of that, the Department of Education is totally committed to supporting the type of innovation that can get us there and realize the potential for technology in education. And we use various levers, both policy and program, to help create a context for folks like you to help push us forward. I'll say a little bit more specifically, sort of 3 ways that we think about it. We support your work directly. There's a relatively small grant program run through IES with their Small Business Innovation Research money, where they give grants of about $1 million to develop ed tech products to improve student learning. They have sort of a subcategory that's designed for special education settings and whatnot. So that's sort of the direct way. The other way we support that work is through the multiple existing grant programs in the Department of Ed, including 2 of our signature programs, Investing in Innovation, or I3, not to be confused with I6 from our friends at Commerce. We love acronyms. And that, and also Race to the Top District, which is in its 2nd year now. Those 2 programs both feature specific technology priorities and how we can use technology effectively. And the reason we do that is because we think technology is exciting in terms of addressing other educational problems like increasing efficiency, helping to scale innovative solutions, increasing reach, improving access and equal opportunities, as I've said. And then kind of the third piece is a lot of our existing research money is great all around the government from folks like NSF and even at Commerce and in the Department of Education and Labor and whatnot. But there's kind of a missing piece, we think, which is sort of DARPA-style advanced research pursuing breakthrough innovations in technology and in the context of education. And so the president's proposed creating a new agency within the Department of Ed called ARPA Ed. And that proposal has been passed by the Senate, but we're waiting on the House to take action on that. And we think that could be something that really moves us forward in helping create the context for scaling innovations. And then the third thing I want to talk about is a recently announced initiative, which is very exciting, which is Connect Ed, which is the president's vision for sort of 21st century classrooms. And what it's about is sort of three main components, but really what it speaks to is a large interagency cooperation and goal setting around creating a context for promising innovations to scale in our schools. So the first piece is sort of an infrastructure piece, which is the president challenged the FCC to modernize the existing E-rate program to figure out a way to connect schools covering 99% of our students to high-speed internet, which we've identified as 100 Mbps plus, but with a road to get to 1 gigabyte within 5 years, which obviously fiber optic networks provide. The second piece is recognizing that technology is not some magic bullet that you can introduce into a school setting and expect amazing things to happen. At the Department of Ed, we're committing to taking a close look at how we can help states and districts better spend the money they get from federal, state, and local resources in the professional development space so that teachers can use technology to help them meet changing professional demands and help students meet more rigorous standards that states are adopting. And then the third piece of it is sort of engaging the public and private sectors to unleash private sector innovation. And I want to spend a minute talking about that so that we can create opportunities for scale. So one piece of that, I want to challenge you all to think about being careful in how you're developing next generation applications that might apply to schools or in an education context. Generally, what we've seen in education is that it's not the case that if you build it, they will come, and if you build a great tool, then it'll automatically sweep the nation and revolutionize education. I don't know that that's true anywhere, but it's especially not true in education for a number of reasons. I think there are demand-side barriers historically that have interrupted that, both the infrastructure piece of schools not having adequate technology infrastructure, and hopefully working with the FCC, we can address that shortly. But there's also sort of a capacity and cultural acceptance of technology in the classroom, and those are all legitimate barriers. But there's also supply-side barriers, which I would challenge you all to think really carefully about as you're developing new applications and solutions, which is what are the reasons that either a newly created application is not properly designed to apply in a classroom context or even in a home learning context, or something that's really well designed, why doesn't that take scale? Why doesn't that catch on? And there's a number of reasons that might be the case, but I would challenge you all to, as you're developing next generation applications, to really think about engaging the end users in the process and creating feedback loops to have iterative improvement as you're developing the product so that they can actually reach scale. And so with that, I will stop, but I'm happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to thank US Ignite for inviting me to participate on this panel, and I am happy to be here to discuss the Commission's initiatives to foster broadband deployment as well as broadband adoption and digital literacy. The FCC has the statutory responsibility to encourage the deployment of advanced broadband networks to all Americans in light of their critical importance to our nation's future. The Commission's commitment to broadband deployment has taken a number of different forms. For example, in addition to promoting the deployment of cutting-edge gigabit networks, the Commission has taken steps to improve the processes for access to rights-of-way and the deployment of wireless facilities. The Commission also has adopted measures to ensure that broadband is available in high-cost areas and to schools and libraries, and has worked to foster computer literacy and broadband adoption. Oh, okay. I'm aware of my time limit, but yes, I'll try. Okay. The Commission has taken a number of steps through its Broadband Acceleration Initiative This initiative, launched in early 2011, represents the combined efforts of our wireless and wireline bureaus, as well as our Office of Native Affairs and Policy, and focuses on innovative broadband networks and ways to facilitate the deployment of infrastructure necessary to make the broadband networks of the future work. The Commission held a workshop in February of 2011, and feedback from that workshop included suggested improvements to local regulation, as well as the processes for deployment of broadband facilities on federal lands. Based in part on that feedback, the Commission took two substantial steps that April. And let me tell you, we know how to get into the weeds at the FCC, so this may sound a little dull, but first, the Commission adopted the pole attachment order, addressing both rate and access issues. Many of the new provisions governing access to poles addressed wireless facilities, including the placement of antennas for distributed antenna systems, or DAS. This order has been extremely successful in facilitating agreements concerning broadband facility deployment projects, particularly ones in Tampa and Pittsburgh. Second, recognizing that the decisions that impact the viability of broadband deployments are in many instances local, the Commission also issued the Broadband Acceleration Notice of Inquiry, seeking comment on potential problems areas in terms of local regulation of access to rights-of-way and the siting of wireless facilities, and also sought comment on barriers to the deployment of broadband facilities on federally owned or managed properties. In June of 2012, President Obama signed Executive Order Number 13616 on accelerating broadband infrastructure deployment, designed to facilitate the deployment of broadband facilities on federally owned or managed property and federally funded highways. And some of you may recall that that executive order was announced at the launching of US Ignite 1 year ago. The Commission has participated as a member of the working group created to implement this executive order, and we are pleased by the important steps it has taken to streamline the application, permitting, and contracting processes for the deployment of broadband facilities on federal property. And earlier this year, then Chairman Janikowski issued the Gigabit City Challenge, urging broadband providers and state and local leaders to bring gigabit service to at least one community in each state by 2015. This measure was designed to accelerate the momentum of very high-capacity broadband network deployment by the private sector and local communities. Some gigabit deployments are widely recognized, such as EPB in Chattanooga and Google in the Kansas cities and surrounding communities, and with plans to expand to Austin and Provo. And groups such as GigU, Fiber to the Home Council, Gigabit Squared, Broadband Communities, and others have been working tirelessly to support fiber builds. And other private providers have stepped up to the plate. For example, CenturyLink has begun offering Omaha residents gigabit service, and AT&T has announced that it will compete with Google in Austin by offering its own gigabit service. Oh, good. Am I speaking into this? I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry. The Commission held a workshop this past March targeting those state and local leaders who make critical decisions determining whether or not gigabit services will be available in their communities. Discussions addressed the various factors that enable existing and emerging gigabit communities to deploy their networks, articulated the economic and social benefits these networks bring, and explored how communities can aggregate demand and lower costs to make gigabit network deployment economically feasible. I especially want to recognize the valuable contributions of US Ignite to our workshop. Not only was Bill Wallace a panelist, but US Ignite also brought technology demonstrations of current US Ignite projects. These demonstrations made tangible the enormous potential of gigabit transmission capacities to workshop participants and attendees, and we very much appreciate the contribution. And in addition to infrastructure-focused efforts, the Commission has modernized its Universal Service Fund to support the deployment of modern communication networks in high-cost areas, a critical step in bringing broadband access to many rural areas. For example, in 2012, carriers accepted nearly $115 million in additional funding to deliver new broadband service to nearly 400,000 unserved Americans. The Commission recently made available another round of funding, up to $485 million, to further leverage private investment in rural America and accelerate the availability of broadband to consumers who lack access. The Commission also is addressing the other side of the deployment adoption equation by fostering public-private partnerships and taking other actions to promote computer literacy and broadband adoption. While the nation continues to make deployment progress, approximately 1/3 of Americans still have not adopted fixed broadband at home, and NTIA reports that a majority of the non-adopters reside in low-income households. Through the Connect to Compete program, internet service providers, technology companies, and nonprofits have made multi-billion-dollar in-kind commitments to address the digital divide by providing eligible households with low-cost internet access and PCs, as well as vital digital literacy training. And the Commission launched a Lifeline Broadband pilot program that will provide critical data and rigorous analysis regarding how Lifeline can efficiently and effectively increase broadband adoption among low-income Americans. Located in 21 states and Puerto Rico, the 14 selected pilot projects are designed as field experiments and will test varying subsidy amounts, access to digital literacy training and end-user charges, data usage limits, choices for broadband speed, and access to equipment. The Commission will make the data from the projects public for the benefit of all interested parties, including those that want to use it for their own studies and observations. In 2010, the Commission adopted reforms to the Schools and Libraries Universal Service Support Program, which is the long name for the E-rate program. Among other things, those reforms provided greater flexibility to schools and libraries in their selection of the most cost-effective broadband services by allowing them to lease fiber from any entity, including state, municipal, and regional research networks. While the E-rate program has helped connect virtually all schools and libraries to the internet, in surveying E-rate applicants, we found that only 20% of the schools and school districts report that their internet access meets their needs. Indeed, we've heard of anecdotes of school having to actually turn off general internet access during standardized testing to ensure enough bandwidth to support the tests. Moreover, the program is oversubscribed. It is capped at just over $2.25 billion per year, and for this coming funding year, we received funding requests of almost $5 billion. Stakeholders, including the State Technology Directors Association and the Bipartisan Lead Commission, have recognized schools and libraries' broadband needs are growing quickly, and they have called on the Commission to further reform the E-rate program to provide support for even more robust broadband to schools and libraries. And as has been mentioned, just this month, President Obama highlighted the vital importance of broadband to our nation's future when he announced the Connect Ed initiative. This is designed to bring high-capacity broadband to, as mentioned, 99% of America's students within the next 5 years, and to ensure that all teachers have appropriate training so they can make full use of high-tech educational tools. As part of his Connect Ed initiative, President Obama has called on the Commission to revamp the E-rate program to support next-generation broadband of speeds of no less than 100 megabits per second and with a target of 1 gigabit per second to our schools and libraries, and to ensure students are connected within their schools and libraries by high-speed wireless. As Chairman Clyburn stated following this announcement, I applaud the President for his bold vision. I look forward to working with my fellow commissioners and many stakeholders as we answer the President's call to modernize this vital program. From the adoption of the National Broadband Plan, to our annual reports to Congress on the state of broadband availability and adoption, to our many universal service reforms over the past 5 years and ongoing efforts that focus on making sure the Universal Service Fund is used to support the networks our citizens need for the future, broadband is virtually our middle name. Widespread access to high-capacity broadband is transforming the way we live, work, and learn, and is critical to our nation's future. Much has been accomplished in this regard, and much remains to be done, and we are expecting a very busy summer at the FCC.
Good morning. I am actually not a Fed. I am a contractor for the Department of Energy out at Argonne National Lab, but this morning I am representing the Department of Energy's Advanced Scientific Computing Research Division, and wanted to take this opportunity to thank US Ignite for including DOE in this program. US DOE's Small Business Innovation Research Opportunities for 2014 is the focus of my introduction today. And basically this program is to invite proposals for small businesses to win awards seeking technology that needs to be developed with an encouragement towards commercialization. Phase one of these grants is really meant to explore the innovation, to understand the feasibility of the application. And if the awardee is then granted a phase 2 award, we're really looking for opportunities for those awards to become commercial opportunities. It's a little bit early in the process, as you'll see in the next slide, in terms of the schedule for this program. Right now, ASCR is in the process of defining the topics for next year. But mainly the topics of interest in this program are management tools for network operators. The networks that we all enjoy the use of from the demonstrations yesterday are still very difficult to not only operate and manage, but to get good performance out of. And the DOE ASCAR program believes there's still opportunities for better tools for network operators as well as for end users to diagnose network problems and performance issues. Also looking for advanced materials on optical network support services, things that will make everything from gigabit to 100 gig Ethernet more deployable in the future. Still a lot of cost barriers to deploying optics in many of those areas. And big data is also an important component of this program. How can researchers advance their techniques in terms of middleware and networking opportunities in the big data arena? And there's always the other category for innovative ideas. As I mentioned, the schedule, the topics are just being fettered right now, so they expect to be released in the next month. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you the URL to keep you informed. The funding opportunity announcement will be issued in mid-August. Letters of intent due in September, so you need to be thinking about that early. Applications are due in October, and awards early in 2014. With that, I'll keep this brief. You can contact either myself or Richard Carlson is the program manager for this activity at DOE. And there are 2 URLs there to keep you informed of topics as well as points of contact and deadlines.
Great. Thank you, Linda. With that, why don't we've only got about 5 minutes left. We can run a little bit over. Do folks have questions for the panelists? I think there's one in the back there.
I have been aware and been tracking things in Korea since serving there as a Peace Corps volunteer. They did not get pervasive broadband adoption until they reached out and did a targeted PR campaign to a much ignored demographic, mothers. And I would encourage people in this room to look to another often ignored agency within your communities, your libraries. If you want uptake, reach out to libraries.
So Connect and Compete started, I think, with the Comcast merger.
right.
It sort of emerged from that. But it's grown a little bit now to where it's sort of a national campaign to increase broadband adoption. And they actually have a new model, I believe, where, so there's sort of 2 sides to increasing adoption and home access. One is their cable offer, which I think is, as long as you have a child that qualifies for free and reduced lunch, and that you pass certain credit gates, you could have access to internet for $9.99 a month through your cable provider, and that's great. There's a new piece that I think they're just rolling out now through their national campaign, which is called Everyone On, which is for home access through 4G and 4G LTE, which is you can get, I think for like $50, you could have a home router, and you get 1 gigabyte for free for a month, and then you can get 12 gigs for, I think, $10 a month after that. And that sort of represents and then also it doesn't have the pre-qualification screens of free and reduced lunch and the credit screen, so it represents like a huge opportunity to really massively drive broadband adoption among the 100 million Americans that currently don't have it in their homes. So it's exciting, and it's an opportunity we want to build on.
Yeah, I was saying, I'm not sure if they're part of the Connect to Compete. I know that also associated with the different merger that there were commitments by CenturyLink. There were CenturyLink, and the CenturyLink territories also provide a low-cost opportunity for low-income families to get access to the internet or broadband.
Great. We got one more back there.
Laura Lane, Woodlawn Broadband Expansion Partnership and Health and Human Services Consortium. One of the challenges that many of the communities face is actually trying to get that affordable broadband network built, fiber to the home, as well as in addition to what you talked about with Connect to Compete, also, the wireless connectivity,
Right.
21st century technology in home, 21st century technology in the schools, and in the social service agencies, and in the other anchor institutions. So help me understand who has funding to help us do that?
So, agencies are constrained in lots of ways by what, is this on? Agencies are constrained in lots of ways by who is applying for funding. So the majority of our universe, so there's particular programs like the schools and libraries programs, which the schools apply to and is an actually, because there's more demand than there is funding, the money first goes to the schools in areas with the highest percentage of low and reduced, free and reduced lunch, price lunches. So that's sort of how that money is doled out. And those are schools that apply for it, and it operates as a discount off what they pay. For supporting the build out of networks, we support what are known as eligible, or our money, the Universal Service Fund is available to eligible telecommunications providers, or ETCs, eligible telecommunications carriers, and they have to provide certain services in order to get the money, and there's a variety of programs. So the money we're in an evolving universal service world, but the money I was speaking about that has been targeted is actually targeted to the large telecommunications carriers that has to be used to offer service in areas that don't currently get service. And the reason, historically that we haven't supported broadband previously. Not that broadband couldn't be built with the money, but the purpose of it was not to support broadband. And some of the reforms that have done over the past 5 years, in particular, what we call the Universal Service and Intercarrier Compensation Transformation Order, changed that to support broadband-capable networks. And now strangely, a lot of the smaller carriers had more support directly or use their money more to support broadband than the larger carriers. So this money is targeted at the larger carriers, and they must use it to build out in places where there is not an unsubsidized competitor. So the idea is to direct the money more to areas that don't currently have a broadband provider. But it's telecommunications carriers that can apply for that get that money through our Universal Service Fund, and there's different mechanisms for competitive providers. And I am not a universal service expertise, I'm more of an infrastructure person, but I can answer specific questions or take them back.
Got one more right here.
I'm Martin O'Shield of Windy City SDR. I've been demonstrating software-defined radio, which blends perfectly into software-defined networking. For all you SDNers, software-defined networking people, I can provide you an IP address to radio waves from 400 megahertz through 6 gigahertz, which you guys from your software-defined networking world would have access to the complete radio waves from those frequencies. My question for you, for Dina from the FCC, Part 15 of the Federal Rules and Regs, I don't know if you're aware of test equipment exemptions. Are you aware of any of that?
I'm familiar with the concept, but I'm a lawyer.
Hence why I asked the question. Hence why I ask you a legal question as it relates to the FCC rules and reg, Part 15.
Right. I work with the Wireless Bureau. I work in the Wireline Bureau, so I'm happy to take a question back, but I don't want to get into the specifics of those questions. But if you want to ask the question, I'll take a note, and if you want to give me your information, yeah. I can connect you with the right person.
I shall. Are you in Chicago, or are you?
I'm in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay. Last question is you guys are having a Access to Capital workshop at your headquarters, I think July 11th. Are you aware of that?
Is this like the internet, open internet group?
It's something to do with access to capital. It's the FCC's holding venture capital firms and investment banks where wireless guys like me, I've been invited by the FCC to come to Washington, D.C., your headquarters. I was just asking, is that something relevant as well?
Is that something relevant?
Relevant to wireless as far as funding new technologies. And if you don't know, you don't know.
I don't know, but I can
Okay.
find out and get back to you.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think I know who the group that's running that workshop, so I can get that.
Good. Other questions from the audience? I just had a quick question. I think it might be helpful if you guys could talk about just in 30 seconds, some example funding opportunities, example recipients that have received funding from you guys, like the I-6 Challenge or I-3. What were the more, is there an exciting example that the audience could understand the types of things that they could do with that grant support?
With respect to I-6, all of the winners, and actually their short descriptions of their projects are on EDA's website. Folks can explore that a little more in depth. They really run the gamut. I think the website is the best resource for getting a flavor of where EDA's sweet spot may be with respect to some of those technology grants.
Okay.
Sure, and then I'll just sort of harken back to the two examples I mentioned. One is there's a number of sort of small education technology companies that receive direct funding assistance from the Institute of Education Sciences, IES, through their SBIR program, so that's one. And then the other piece is through I-3 and Race to the Top District and some of the other programs. There's not necessarily direct funding sources available for people to create next generation apps, for example, but a lot of them have technology priorities, and so what that means is there's opportunity and need for partnership among folks like you guys and school districts and individual schools to create innovative programs that use technology to create better learning outcomes for kids. And so that might involve you developing a specific application or adapting an existing application for use and deployment in a school or in a network of schools.
Great. Well, good. Well, can we give a round of applause to our panel?